All right, welcome everybody to the first webinar in our Hot Topics in Fire Science and Stewardship webinar series. My name is Katie Lowe, and I'm the statewide coordinator for the UC ANR Fire Network. And I'm joined here today by Cleo Wolfley-Hazard and Barb Satink-Wolfson, who are two of our fire advisors, and Brian Peterson and Alice Lincoln-Cook, who are our wonderful presenters today. So for folks that are just joining, this is the first webinar in a 4-part series that the Fire Network is hosting this summer, where we're hoping to highlight and spotlight some of the latest fire science and stewardship related research that's been going on, both in California and in the Western US, and I guess internationally too. And we're hoping to bring some of the latest science to you all with some of our colleagues, again, from around the world. So with that, I will hand it over to Barb and Cleo to kick off the webinar.
Okay, good morning. My name is Cleo Wolfley-Hazard, and I'm really excited to see everyone. I'm just going to start by introducing our first speaker, but I'm really excited about both speakers who are both collaborators and friends and really great folks to work with. So Alice Lincoln-Cook is a Cuttick tribal member and executive director of the California Indian Basketweavers Association. She's also an artist, a jewelry maker, basket weaver, and she teaches and runs a lot of events out of her amazing store, the Klamath Book Nook, up in Klamath, California. So if you're ever driving up 101, make sure to stop in there. Yeah, she's done a lot of work with schools, weavers, and other institutions. So without further ado, I'll just kick it off to Alice.
Thank you, Cleo. And again, thank you for allowing me to have space here, inviting me to this. So I'm honored to be able to speak and talk a little bit about what CIBA has been doing, what I've been doing personally, and what our goals and what we're doing to just continue culture burn and so on and so forth. So again, my name is Alice Lincoln-Cook, and I'm a Cuttick tribal member. I am the chair and the acting ED for the California Indian Basketweavers Association. So with our programs, we started out with Following the Smoke program, which is I explains what it is. We followed the smoke by having burns and following it and being able to get materials from a burn, better quality materials. Along with that program, we were able to build partnerships. So a big part of that program was building partnerships, so that we in Peru, we don't have a huge land base, so we have partners that we have to work with for a lot of our land, and so that's where it became a huge partnership in working with them. Laverne Glaze and several other basket weavers many years ago started this program. I came on board and had gone to a couple of programs in Orleans, and then I proceeded to, after getting with the California Basketweavers Association on the board, we revitalized the program and brought it back. And we just made it bigger. We didn't keep it just in the Orleans area. We spread it out throughout the state of California. After we did Following the Smoke, we moved on to Rekindling the Fire, which at that point we were able to put like a demonstration culture burn down on the at a facility of private land, and we were able to educate. We were able to offer red cards. We were able to actually have cultural people come out and do the burning and talk about it and start it with pitch sticks, start it with basic things, not with a lot of equipment or anything around. And now with both these programs, we've incorporated youth into both these programs. And our goal is to build our youth leadership, teach them about fire, teach them about building relationships, and then teaching them how to put fire on the ground so they can become what we're fighting for, I guess. So things that we're fighting for, our youth they're going to be the ones that are going to be right in the middle of it. And so with educating them and giving them all this work that we've done already, they can lead us and continue these programs moving forward. So that's kind of what we do with CIBA in terms of fire. for me, fire is, when I started out, I just did fire for basket weaving, to enhance our materials, to make it so there wasn't bugs. There's so many different things. This material is much more stronger. Each material is different. And as I moved on and going to many of different fire events, many different fire talks, it really is something that I never thought about as that's what we've been doing all of our life, is putting fire on the ground. And now we have to educate about how we're putting fire on the ground. So it's different for me, because it's something, our way of life. It isn't something that was, that we're not changing because the fire is different. This is what we've been doing all the time, but it was taken from us. So now we're fighting to get culture fire back on the ground, so we can still do the things we need to do, still be able to harvest our land, still be able to man our land. And we're putting up a good fight. And I think we're getting a lot of places where we can sit at the table, just like here, be able to sit at the table and talk about it for people to understand it better. If you don't understand our culture, you don't understand our needs. And we're not after trying to get everything that we can from you guys. We're trying to build a relationship so that we can all work together, and it can be a strong relationship together for continued, for continued culture for our kids. So that's kind of where I've led so far, and what it means to me. And like, again, I think that for us, we have like a full circle that we go by, and a big balance that we go by in our life. And right now that full circle has been broken, and now we're trying to balance out, how do we get that back? That's what we're fighting for now. So we're fighting to get all that stuff back. I've been fortunate enough to meet Cleo, meet him at some of the seminars I've been at, and now we're working on a couple different things, and I would love for Cleo to talk more about that.
Okay, yeah. So as Alice said, we actually met back at this AFI conference back in December, and just started to talk about what work we could do together. And so she's been for a while working on presentations on cultural fire inside of the Basic 32 wildland fire training, and together with other collaborators, including Bo Goodwin and others, to really share with both Native folks and non-Native folks who are going into fire, what is the role of cultural fire, what is the importance of that. And so I've been starting to work with her to just write some of that curriculum up, and frame it in objectives, lesson plans, different modules of different lengths, and then trying to figure out how to write some grants and really support getting that message out. And so the idea is that the class would be called Culture and Fire, and there would be a core curriculum that's kind of the same across California, and then there'd be parts of it that were locally specific. So one of the ideas with the Native folks who are getting certified, getting their red card, is to really understand how much they already know about culture and fire just from growing up in the culture. And then some of these objectives are for everyone, right? To understand the policies affecting cultural burning, how cultural burners can legally burn and manage cultural species on public and private land, the barriers and barriers and opportunities to bringing cultural fire knowledge into fire careers, and then just some of the other kind of politics around settler colonialism and fire suppression that have really led us to the conditions that our landscapes are in today, where it is hard for cultural burners to go out and burn because of fuels buildup, but also because of access and different legal and regulatory barriers. And so, and then, for non-Native folks, there's also some specific objectives to really understand tribal sovereignty, local treaties and laws, protecting cultural features, and including culturally managed plant communities, to examine their beliefs about Native people and cultural fire.
Like I said, I'll leave with everything that's the week just to see.
Sorry, let me just mute that. Okay, thanks. That could be obstacles to partnering with tribes, and then just understanding kind of basic common principles of respectful partnerships with Native nations, and how they might go about developing local MOUs or protocols for engaging with local tribes. And my part of my objective in this as a fire advisor is to really try to increase opportunities for cultural burners to be able to access the plants that they need to manage for basketry. And so, a lot of the lands in California are owned by private landowners who aren't native, and some of those people might be interested in partnering with cultural burners to do some of this work that needs to be done. And so trying to lay the groundwork for that and provide a little bit of like a matchmaking service or something for folks. So that's kind of what we're planning to do. And then there's different activities that we're developing. We've piloted this in different ways, but maybe I'll turn it back to you, Alice, just for the last couple minutes in case you have any closing thoughts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, the last couple minutes. So, as Cleo talked about that program, I actually went through a basic 32 program. And when I did go through that program, I was a little bit taken back with the lack of culture that was taught within that fire program, especially in the area it was taught, which was in our area. That's why I went there. I went there to see how much culture was being taught, and it wasn't. In fact, it was taught by my brother, but he was given a very limited window to do it. And we can't educate about the needs unless we have the time, a bigger window to be able to do that. So being able to implement this into the fire programs is going to be a really big thing. And I'm grateful to have Cleo working with us because I hate paperwork. I like to talk, and that's it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to having that, being able to get in the forestry programs, getting in the basic 32 programs, letting people know about our culture, learn about our culture, and be able to either help us and fight for us, or if there's Native students in some of these classes, to educate them to the directions of how to get there and what to do. I mean, our thought originally is we don't need a red card to fight on our own land. We haven't had to have a red card to fight on our own land forever. So, ideally we don't want to, but the tape that we're having to deal with, we have to go through those steps. And I say, go through the steps, get in there, and then fight for what you believe in at that point. So yeah, again, I appreciate you guys giving me the time today to talk about it.
Thank you so much, Alice. So we're gonna actually hold questions until that after the second presenter, but you're welcome to put your question in the chat, just if you are worried you're gonna forget it, and then we can circle back around to that after the next presenter. So I'm gonna turn it over to Barb, who's gonna introduce Brian.
Hi, Brian Peterson is our next presenter, and he's a fire ecologist with Fire Forward up in Sonoma County, and he does a lot of great on-the-ground firework monitoring, burning, and doing a lot of good fire, a lot of good burning. So I'll pass it over to Brian.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen here for some slides. Let's see if it works. Does that work? Does everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, thanks so much. So I've been accused of talking a little fast, and so I am trying to slow down when I give presentations, but I have a lot to cover here and not much time, so maybe today's not the day for that. So I apologize if I'm going kind of fast, but I'm going to try to get through these slides and talk about a project we're doing out in Martin Griffin Preserve. For some reason, my slides will not advance. Let me try something else. Sorry. I think maybe I shared a picture.
If you click the PowerPoint button or go to slideshow at the top window, and then
It is a cool picture.
from beginning.
Thank you. Okay, there we go. I shared just a picture. Yeah, yeah, classic.
Okay.
Okay, so really quick, yeah, my name is Brian Peterson. I work for Audubon Canyon Ranch's Fire Forward program. And essentially in Sonoma and Marin counties is where we work. And essentially we, our main mandate, as you will, is to just try to build prescribed fire capacity in our region. And that looks a lot of different ways. And we do a lot of different things. Part of that's training people. A part of it's developing capacity, getting people to write burn plans, land managers know how to do these things, and also just to plan the burns themselves and staff the burns and make them happen. Also doing a lot of advocacy work. So we basically do whatever we feel it takes to get capacity better in our counties. So really what I'm going to talk about today is a project we're doing out at Martin Griffin Preserve, which is one of our personal preserves, or one that Audubon Canyon Ranches owns. It's off the Bolinas Lagoon, so just north of Stinson Beach and east of Bolinas, if you're familiar with that area in West Marin County. This is a picture of it. It's a piece of property that was bought by Audubon Canyon Ranch. It was the original property that organization bought. Our organization bought in like 1962, I believe, to preserve egret and heron rookery, which is now since gone. But it's about 1,000 acres that's surrounded by federal land in West Sonoma. So one of the things that we're seeing, we see this all up and down the coast, is we're losing grasslands at a pretty rapid rate due to fire suppression as well as some other things. And this is definitely the case at Audubon Canyon Ranch. You can see here in the photos that in the 1970s, this is a picture where right after they bought the property, it was all grassland up there. And then 1980s, you can see it filling in with coyote brush. 1990s, a little more quite a bit more coyote brush. And then as today, there's no new photo point because I can't find this photo point because the shrubs are too tall to even be able to find this. So a really fast change. It's all happened on Audubon Canyon Ranch's watch. And a big problem or a big mistake we feel we've made as an organization is when they bought the property, they kind of had that let it be attitude that a lot of conservation organizations had some of those earlier years, which is clearly was a mistake. You can also see that in 1952, this is aerial photography. You can see there's a bunch of grasslands those are the ridges. There's no topographic lines, but there was these big grasslands along the ridges. And then 2021, you can see there's barely any grasslands left. And so this is the issue that we're trying to kind of address on the property there. The black lines on the 1952 and the white lines in the 2021, those are rough burn units we have in project areas, although we've expanded our project areas since then. So here's a quick overview of aerial photography in 1952 in those same areas that I just basically drew on the map, did some heads-up digitizing, just to kind of get an idea of how many acres we've lost. And you can see it's pretty dramatic change over the years. And we're working on reversing that back to some grasslands. So what we're seeing out there is a lot of really young forests. We often call them the Blair Witch Project forest, or the kind of horror movie forest you can't even barely walk through. A bunch of young trees, and all these used to be grasslands. So we have a lot of Doug fir encroachment into these grasslands, and we have a lot of coyote brush encroachment as well. So this is the kind of situation we're dealing with. So some of our goals in this area, recognizing that we have a huge loss of grasslands, both on our property, but also widespread throughout the Coast Range, due to our land management practices, or poor land management practices, as it were. Our goals were to map the remnant grasslands that were there. So all the native grasses that were still there, California perennial bunch grasses, were still barely surviving under a bunch of trees and shrubs and about to blink out and die. We wanted to map those so that we could kind of do a triage thing and get those in better conditions first. Increase native grassland cover, increase native species diversity, increase culturally significant plants, as well as working on access agreements and management agreements with the local tribe, which this whole area is in the territory of ancestral territory of Coast Miwok, and now the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria. So we're working on an access agreement as well with them. It's still in the works though, so there hasn't been a lot of planning on the ground. We're also trying to create a more mosaic structure out there. Reintroduce fire as a disturbance process, stop encroachment where we can and reverse it. So one of our first steps was to map the remnant grasses, and you can see here, this yellow is areas that all used to be grassland, and it's pretty much all forest and shrubs now. But as you walk through here off those Blair Witch Project forests I was talking about, you can find little dying grasses, bunch grasses that are still there from the previous grassland. So we mapped all those areas. There's like grasslands hiding within the forest, essentially. We mapped all these grasslands so that we could go in there and cut them out, cut out trees and shrubs with chainsaws and do some burning and reinvigorate those grasses. One way we're really doing that, as folks may know who have done this kind of work, coyote brush is really difficult to get rid of. It sprouts back from the roots readily, and it's just a really tenacious plant. But what we have out there is a bunch of Doug fir trees that are large Christmas tree size, you know, maybe like town square style Christmas tree size, and a bunch of shrubs. So the reason shrubs are kind of hard to kill is that when they burn, all the heat goes up and not a lot goes down into the roots or the to kind of kill those roots. So they just resprout readily. So what we've been doing is we've been cutting down all those Doug fir trees and laying them on top of the coyote brush and making sure we don't put those trees on top of the grasses that are still there. So we preserve those on top of the coyote brush and then burning it, and hopefully killing a few more of those coyote brush plants and opening it up for more grasslands. As you can see here, this is a bench that I unfortunately did not take a picture last week when I was out there, but none of these trees are here anymore. And this is all grassland behind this bench currently. So when we do that's jackpot burning. So when we do that, we don't make these tidy cow fire 4x4 piles out there. That's far too much work. We make these kind of sprawling big jackpot piles that we burn, and then we seed with grass that we've collected or other native plants. Some areas we can burn without containment line. For those who are not familiar with that term, containment line, when we do a prescribed fire, we need some kind of containment line around that, whether it's road or trail or something like that. But we've been trying to work with local agencies to let us burn when different vegetation types, say the forest is too wet to burn, but the grasslands are dry enough to burn, and we can just use that forest as containment line instead of digging a bunch of line or using roads or stuff like that. Yeah, so we're collecting seed, planting seed, and monitoring. Here's some pictures of us cutting and, like I said, sort of piling. Again, like this area, this situation in the middle, you could not see that view at all. It was all kind of like scary forest. And now this is, I would say 90% native grasses coming up. And we've been collecting a ton of seed the last couple of years out of this site, which has become kind of a donor site. Jackpot burning. So you can see here what I mean by sprawling piles. So we'll burn these when the surrounding grasses have greened up. So they're not going to, these piles aren't going to go anywhere, but these piles are on the larger side compared to like our normal small fires. And then we go back and plant these areas that have been burnt out. We also use more traditional kind of broadcast burning where we burn the whole unit, like we said, a containment line. You can see in the far, I guess it'd be the right-hand corner. That's us burning out. That's actually before, look at that picture, and then look at this middle picture here. This is the same area. This is a year after we burnt, is here. And that bottom right is the first time we burned that. And we burned this without containment line, like I had mentioned. And so we collect a bunch of seed. This is, again, that same meadow. We're collecting a bunch of seed. We're able to collect seed in an umbrella, basically just hitting it in the umbrella. And then we're planting the seed back into these kind of burn scars here. So I like this picture. We have some smoke jumpers that came out and helped us plant these grass seeds. So I love seeing those firefighter folks, suppression firefighter folks planting grass seed. And then we do some monitoring. Here's just 3 pictures of photo points after the last 3 years. So the one on the left was how it looked after we did our first little round of cutting. And then we burnt that off, and you can see slowly we're moving more and more trees and getting more grasses in there. So next steps for this project really are to kind of get more diversity in our grasslands. The native grasses, perennial native grasses, are responding remarkably really well, mostly with our purple needlegrass, California brome, and blue wild rye, which are kind of the workhorses of California native grasslands and the coast. But that said, as happy as I am with that, we clearly need more plant diversity in these grasslands with different forb species. And like I said before, establishing more of these culturally significant plants in these meadows. Yeah, so we just got to collect more seed and do more amplification. One really difficult thing is that while those grasses are responding well, we're getting quite a bit of grass seed collected on site by us. But finding seed for some of those different plants that used to be in these meadows that are no longer there is pretty difficult. You know, you can hike all spring in these general areas looking for like a little patch of Clarkias or different, tuber type wildflowers. And it can take you all season to find a little area, and maybe there's not enough plants there to really collect seed from. And then once you collect that seed, it might not be very much. So that's a big difficulty we're running into now for that goal. But and then finally at the end here, like I'd mentioned before, is we're developing access agreements with the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria and establishing more of those plants. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I know it's a really quick kind of blow through of the work we're doing out there, but yeah, I'm open to hear any questions. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Brian. Just as feel free to type questions into the chat, but we're also going to launch a couple polls just so we can learn a little bit about you, what you might be interested in the future, kind of where you're coming from, just a few little questions that'll come up on screen. And are there any questions? You can unmute one at a time. There aren't too many of us on here, I think. We can probably do that, or you can feel free to type it in the chat for either Alice or Brian. So Katie, that looks like the results are showing up. That's really interesting. We don't have cultural fire practitioners or prescribed fire practitioners on here, but we have restoration folks, and of course, lots of folks interested in all things fire, which is, I kind of qualify as that too.
I'm going to give folks a second to fill out this poll and I'll end it. But there's a question in the chat.
Yep. So there's one question. And is that for Sophia Marquez? Is that for Brian or Alice? For Brian, okay. Brian, the question is there any graduate work being done on this project, either PhD or master's?
Yeah, there's a master's student, Sophie Noda, who works for Point Blue, but also is in Davis, doing grad work on establishment of coyote brush and native grasses within these burn scarred areas. Yeah, but we're open to more, so if people are interested.
And there's another question, Carol Kramer. What is program 32? And I'm also not sure if that is.
Oh, that might be for Alice about what
Alice,
is
okay.
the basic 32 wildland training. Do you want to answer that, Alice? Oh, you're muted.
I forget to explain that all the time. It just, so basic 32 is a firefighting class. So you're going through a week of training, learning about fire, learning about weather, learning about everything you can about fire. And then they take you out on the grounds and you do some hands-on work and stuff with fire. And then you have to pass a pretty rigid test, pretty hard test to fight fire at a certain level, be able to get on the ground at a certain level. So everybody's, there's 3 different stages of that basic 32. So I went for the highest one because that's who I am. And I didn't pass it the first time, and I passed it the second time because I wanted to be able to have that to go on the grounds anytime I wanted. There's different levels that you can go out and you can be chaperoned, or there's ones that you can watch from afar, but I wanted to be out on the grounds to be able to tell our basket weavers where these burns, where these happened, and to be able to walk on the ground and make sure it's a safe place for them to go out. So that was my goal for, I don't want to fight fire. I just want to be able to help our Basketweavers and our people with fire knowledge and or fire information with basket weaving and stuff like that, plants.
Thanks. There's also a slightly more involved question in there for you, Alice, from Sherilyn Cox. I work for a small nonprofit whose goal is to improve forest management on federal lands in Oregon via cultural burning and other traditional ecological knowledge. How can we best help to ensure tribal voices are heard within our collaborative?
Yeah, so I mean, for us and I mean, Oregon's totally different. So I mean, like in Northern California, where I'm based out of, Karuk, Yurok, Kawa, these burning programs, these culture burns are so strong. They have such amazing structure. They've built amazing relationships and doing that. And that's where the basic needs to start. And that's where we started, like following smoke, rekindling the fire, doing these small little programs to build up to have someday your own tribe putting on their own culture fire with your people. That's the ultimate end result for me, is like not having our hands tied as to what we can or can't do on our own property or on our own tribal land. So that's some of the goals that we have with it. But building some of these programs, reaching out to people that have put fire on the ground and have done some of these programs is super important. Building relationships in terms of your Oregon tribe and keeping it together within tribes, within the tribes surrounding, I think is super important too. I think 4 or 5 tribes together is much stronger than one. And learning from each other is super important, because some of us know what we've done already that doesn't work. And then we can educate to the ones and say, hey, this didn't work, move on and try this, or whatever you can do. So it's super important to build those relationships and reach out to people who have done it. And there's a lot of groups out there right now putting culture fire on the ground and have structure for it.
And maybe part of that would be supporting intertribal networking and intertribal training, stuff like that.
Definitely. We go to that quite a bit. We have a lot of, I mean, again, implementing the basic 32 and then going out there at a basic 32 class and educating about fire, having a slot in there educating about fire. That's a huge part of it. But yeah, you know, reaching out and reaching out to as many people as you can to see what you can do. Learning about our culture is super important so that you can understand the needs. And again, when I say that, it's not because I want this, I want that. I want to be able to build it and work together to build it so that we can have a continued strong relationship, you know, for our children, for our future.
There's thanks, Alice. There's a question in the chat from Jane for Brian. Is there a collaboration with the National Park Service at Point Reyes for seed collection?
The short answer is no. But it is a great idea and is some, you know, we've been meaning to reach out to GGNRA folks. Yeah.
And then there's another one from Lathrop Leonard, if I'm saying that right. If I'm not, I apologize. Have you tried raking the grass seeds into the soil after burning at California State Parks North Coast? We have found that to help with survival. Also wondering if you grow plants, then plant them after burning, so plugs.
No on the plugs, just because of capacity of doing all that work. We don't really have that. And then yes, on raking, we've also, those 2 firefighters I had pictures of, we having them do what we call the boot dance, just kind of stomping them in. And then we also use, flappers, which are like big mud flaps basically on the end of a stick to kind of make contact with the soil. But definitely open for other techniques because it's kind of time consuming and it's, yeah, but it does seem to help.
I know in the Southwest, this would be controversial in some areas where there's not grazing, but in areas where there's grazing, they will actually corral cattle to stomp the seeds in, and it's native seed. Oh, how are we doing on time, Katie?
We're doing great. We have a couple more minutes. There's another question from Carol in the chat. What seasons are you burning for native species preservation? I believe this is addressed to Brian, right, Carol? Yeah, okay.
We're burning in a lot of seasons, just depending on basically when we can. but typically we try not to burn in spring. And we mostly try to burn after most native plants have dropped their seeds on the ground. So a little later in the year, but we burn in the winter as well, because when we're burning piles, that's the safe time to burn them.
Well, I always like to ask the presenters if anyone, if you have questions for one another, or yeah, any thoughts on what each other were talking about.
Yeah, I was just joking, Cleo, when I told Brian I was going to ask him lots of questions.
Your hard-hitting questions.
I was just joking. I was just harassing him, that's all. So now, no, I don't have anything for Brian at all. I mean, this is my first time getting to meet him and getting to see the stuff that he's doing. I'm sure I'll think of lots more questions.
Yeah, I mean, a question I would have that's longstanding obviously does not need to be answered now, but Alice, I would just always be wondering if California Basketweavers would be ever interested in doing projects in Sonoma or Marin County. Yeah, I'd be very, very, very happy to collaborate in the future. So
yeah, no,
the question,
that's our ultimate goal is, you know, by educating, there's only one way of educating, and that's getting out there on the grounds, going to as many places as we can within the state of Oregon state of California where we service. And so we have been doing that for the last 2 years. We've had we had 5 different events last year in California. And then this year we've had 6 different events, including and incorporating youth a little bit more into our events. And so we are going to continue doing that. And part of following the smoke, rekindling the fire, and then incorporating that youth into that, and then making partnerships wherever we can go, whether it's on a preserve, a conservancy, whether it's private land, or whether it's a tribal facility. That's our ultimate goal, is going out there and educating as much as we can to enhance our culture and the things that we need. And it's just not about basket weaving. There's foods, there's so much that goes into fire, as well as the seeds and replanting. There's a huge part of it that it's just not about basket weaving.
mm-hmm.
It's a huge, again, way of our way of life. So it's kind of come up to that more so. But one thing leads to another, like our smoke, that if we're burning our willow, we're using the smoke for the willow, and which will take the bugs out. And then the smoke can also be used for the oaks, which will also take the bugs out of our acorns. So it's not so much putting fire on those grounds, but it's those help our foods and our dances, and some of these materials, and some of the baskets that we use are cooking baskets. So putting actual diesel with burning it isn't beneficial. Some of it's for our baby rattles. So we're not going to use diesel for our willows to burn, because they're going to put it in their mouths. So there's so much that goes into it that affects our way of life. And I'm truly honored to be able to tell that to people, so they understand it a little bit. Like, we're just not fighting for our rights back. We're fighting for our rights for our way of life back. So it's super important. But yeah, we would love to collaborate with many people as possible. So.
There are a couple other questions in the chat. This one's for Brian. Have you been able to compare different fire return intervals and its effect on native to exotic species ratios?
Yeah, I would say there's some interesting things to that question. I would say specifically like a bunch of comparisons of different fire return intervals. Not really, because we're so limited on when we can burn or how we can burn. And our first burn out there was 2019. So to my mind, to really compare a lot of different fire intervals, we need to be burning out there for the last 30 years. That said, we have learned a lot about when you're taking out all these, one thing is when you're taking out all these big trees with lots of heavy wood and doing these burn piles, you can expect weeds. It's just kind of what is going to happen, I believe, anyways, when you let the forest get that far, or the grasslands get that far encroached upon. So there's ways we're trying to mitigate that. One is planting the grass seed right away.
Thanks, Brian. And then one last question for you, Brian. Do you have experience with burning for invasive species control?
Yeah, mostly star thistle and Medusa head. But both have been pretty successful burning in far late spring, early summer.
And then one last question from Cleo. I know that there are some tribes in Humboldt and Del Norte who are growing out native seeds at their own nurseries. Is that kind of partnership with FIGR that you might pursue in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great way to collaborate in the future moving forward. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. I just did get one question directly in. I'm not going to have time to really address it, but it was around this question of, these partnerships for connecting private landowners to cultural burners. And so, yeah, this is a thing that I'm going to try to work on up in Humboldt and Del Norte counties. And have just one partnership that Alice and I have started at a queer project outside of Blue Lake, where there's some hazel, and landowner had really wanted a cultural burner to come in and manage the hazel. And so I reached out to Alice, and now we're starting a partnership with the Cal Poly Humboldt Cultural Burn Club to, and with Alice being a mentor on that. So I think a lot of times it does take personal connections, because that's how, relationships work in Indian country especially. But yeah, I'm learning a lot from, and I'm interested in, talking to landowners who have done these type of partnerships, or to cultural burners who have made these types of partnerships, just to try to, maybe get together a panel or an event like this where we could hear from different burners and landowners about how to make those kinds of relationships work in the future. So feel free to reach out about that to me or to any of our participants, and about anything else. And yeah, turn it back over to Kate.
Yeah, thank you so much to Brian and Alice for sharing your knowledge with us today. And thanks to Barb and Cleo for facilitating. As I mentioned, this is the first webinar in our 4-part webinar series. So our next Hot Topics webinar is going to be next Wednesday, June 5th from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific. And that'll be featuring the work from Dr. Jane Cawson and Dr. Max Moritz. And they will be talking about new ways to assess plant flammability. And if you're interested in learning more about the webinar series, you can click the link that I'm going to paste in the chat, which is our Fire Network website events page. Generally, you can also click back here from time to time to keep up with the network and see what we're doing. So with that, thank you so much for joining us during your lunch break today, and we'll see you next time.